Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome, task force members and staff and guests. It's my pleasure to welcome all of you to our Syracuse Canal regional offices for the second official meeting of the Upstate Flood Mitigation Task Force. My name is Brian Stratton. I am the director of the Canal Corporation and the chair of the task force. For the benefit of those of you who may be joining us online today, for the first time, I will recap our mission, why we are here, and what we are charged to do. As most of you know, it was on July 1st of this year, Governor Hochul signed into law legislation which amended the mission and the scope of the Upstate Flood Mitigation Task Force and named the director of the Canal Corporation as task force chair. Let me also acknowledge and reintroduce and thank those who have been named to the task force, most of whom are joining us with us here today in Syracuse and or on a screen. Commissioner and some of them are actually represented by other individuals who will go around the room in addition to the notes that I will read here. Commissioner of the New York State Department of Transportation, Marie-Therese Dominguez, Commissioner of the New York State Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services, Jackie Bray, Commissioner of the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, Basil Sagos, Emergency Management and Flood Management Specialist, Bill Neckerman, Hydrologist Ted Andreni, Soil and Water Conservation Specialist, Peter Nichols, and Civil Engineering Experts, Oren Murray and Ravi Ravindra. Again, I thank each of you for your service and your commitment to our task. And some of our commission and our task force members were unable to join us today in person. Some of them are on screen, but I think it may be helpful before we introduce the people and acknowledge those who are on screen to have an opportunity to go around the room to introduce everyone if you're here. But one of our commissioners, please introduce yourself. Dan, we'll start with you over there around in the corner. We'll work our way around this way, go to the outside of the room, and then up to the screen.
Dan Clark with Robbie Engineering and Land Survey.
Thank you, Dan. I know Robbie's on screen. We'll get to him in just a moment.
Ted Andreni, hydrologist with SUNY ESF.
Nichols, I'm with fluid geomorphologist. I'm with the Schoharie County Soil and Water Conservation District, also representing the Mohawk River Coalition of Conservation Districts.
Warren McMurray, professional civil engineer.
Bill Neckerman, I'm a floodplain manager, formerly the New York State DEC floodplain management program.
Jim Flynn, Director of Structures for New York State DOT. I'm filling in for Commissioner Dominguez, who cannot make it today.
Hi everyone, I'm Lindsay Fuller. I'm a chief of staff at New York State Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services, and I'm filling in on behalf of Commissioner Gray. Susanna Randall with the Governor's Office of Water Government.
Howard Goebel, Chief Technical Officer with the New York Power Authority and Canal Hydrologist.
Good afternoon, Matt Marco. I'm the Director for Region 7 of the Department of Environmental Conservation, sitting for Commissioner Basil Sagos.
Good afternoon, I'm Pete Casper. I'm a principal attorney with NIPA. I've been working with canals since 2005 with a short detour to DEC for 2 years.
Good afternoon, Tim Walsh. I'm the Regional Director for DEC Region 8, also representing Commissioner Sagos.
Shane Mahar, Public Information Officer for NIPA Canals.
Rob, would you like to introduce
Sure.
yourselves?
Robert Carollo, IT support with NIPA as well as Canals.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you for being possible, Joel.
I'm Joelle Marie Kirsten. I'm manager of government and community relations with the New York region.
Maureen Doyle, resident and property owner in the Cross Lake Central River area.
Good afternoon, John Harmon, President of the United Lake Association, and I'm here representing our 2,500 members.
Rick Pappage, representing Robbie. Thank you, Rick. All right, now let's go up onto the screen. Rob, can you put the folks back up on the screen momentarily? So we can see who's with us.
I'm Nagapal Ravindra with Ravi Engineering.
Hi, Robbie. Yeah, we're gonna get you up. We're gonna get you visible here so we can see everybody. There you are. Thank you. It's good to have you with us. We have your staff here too.
Thank you.
And we're so happy that you joined. Who else is with us on screen and tuning in today?
Hi, Brian. Jackie Schillinger, member of the public engagement team with Joelle and Shane. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Jackie. It's good to have you with us. Jackie is part of our intergovernmental relations team and is extremely active out in the field. So she'll be with us, I'm sure, as future meetings and follow-up activities. Mayor Marie Kramer up in the top. Hello, Marie. Please introduce.
Hello there, Director Stratton. It's nice to see everybody together.
Good. Marie is great, former mayor of beautiful village of Macedon. And then we have a couple of other folks. Would you like to introduce yourself, Lisa?
Hi, Lisa Dolphin, Water Resource Engineer with Bergman.
Thank you very much, Lisa. And Michael. Oh, Michael may have stepped away, but we'll hear from him shortly. I also want to be able to thank you, Rob. We can go back to the slides now. I also want to be able to thank members of the legislature, some whose staff are here today, and in particular, Senator John Mannion, Senator Al Surfy, and Senator John Lamondes, who have joined us on previous meetings and have interacted in some of the preliminary group meetings and town hall meetings that we have held. And we know that there's a lot of competition today as President Biden visits Syracuse, so they are excused and hopefully really fund the federal support Syracuse needs. Our mission today, and our mission every day within the task force, is to explore the cost and the impact of flooding along the Erie Canal over the last 5 years and across key economic sectors. We spent the morning touring 4 of those locations within the Oswego River basin. We're going to be talking more about that today as we get underway. Secondly, we must assess the canal system's operations, procedures, and plans that may impact flood mitigation and management, and then identify adaptive measures with costs that could be executed to mitigate flood damages. And finally, once we have gathered all of that information, we will deliver a report to Governor Hochul by July 1st, 2023. The report must be online, and it must be clear the report must outline clear and actionable steps for both the state and local communities to take to prevent future flooding to every extent possible and to mitigate the cost and the damages caused by future floods. It is worth repeating here that the solution to the issues that we face is not a solution that will be driven by a singular agency. Rather, it will be achieved by various authorities and stakeholders working together as a collective. This is a complex challenge with decades of both flooding and attempted flood prevention for us to examine and to incorporate into the solutions that we propose and put forward to the communities. So, at our kickoff meeting on August 22nd in Albany, we pledged to move forward with a schedule of meetings in the fall and into 2023, which will allow the task force for the opportunity for on-the-ground field field visits, and we began that earlier today. This morning, we toured 4 critical components within the Oswego River Basin to learn more about their individual dynamics and to discuss opportunities for engineering new solutions. Today's meeting will be largely devoted to reviewing those 4 stops. Like now, before we go through that, though, we'll first give the opportunity for our task force members to make any opening statements that they would like to make. So let's hear from the task force members. Dan, can we hear from you, or would you yield to Robbie?
I yield to Robbie.
Okay. Robbie, would you like to say anything to get us started? We'll,
Yeah, not at this time.
very good. Thank you very much. Ted.
I have nothing to add at this point.
Peter.
Nothing to add.
If you're all speechless, we can wait until we get into the meat of the matter. Okay, very good. As noted, the legislation, I think we're going on to slide number 2. As noted, the legislation creating this body prescribes 9 task force members. They include 4 agency heads, 5 additional members appointed by the governor, the temporary president of the Senate, and the Assembly Speaker. Next slide. Just to quickly recap the focus of the legislation. I think we want to go on to the next one, Rob. The task force is tasked with preparing a report by July 1st. The objectives to be considered is the cost and the impact of flooding over the last 5 years, to assess the canal system's operations, procedures, and plans which may impact flood mitigation and management, to list adaptive measures with costs that can be executed to mitigate flood damages, and to hold public hearings to solicit relevant information. It is important that we know that the task force has limitations. We can provide recommendations, but the state of New York does not have the authority over other water management authorities or municipalities. Very important to know. Next slide, please. The scope of the focus will include 2 extremely large watersheds outlined here, and that is the Mohawk River Basin on the right and the Oswego River Basin on the left. Going back to our site visits from this morning, our tour bus led us to 4 important locations along the Oswego River Basin. I think we want to go to the next slide, Rob. So you see that's the path we took. We convened at approximately 9 a.m., got on the bus and went from our first stop here at the Syracuse office off to the Cottonwood Dam, and then to lot B24 along the Erie Canal in Baldwinsville, to the Cross Lake Inn and Marina, and then on to the Cayuga Seneca Canal, Cayuga Seneca Canal Lot 1, each of which have individual water control structures and are important to the task at hand as we begin to examine the Oswego River Basin. And I would like to now turn things over to Howard Goebel, our chief hydrologist and subcommittee task force chair. Howard is going to lead us through our 4 steps and the dynamics there.
Yeah, thanks, Director Stratton. I'm going to give a summary of our bus tour today. It was very useful to put eyes and boots on the ground to actually see some of the water control infrastructure and some of the limitations in water management and flood mitigation that exists throughout the Oswego River Basin. So we started off with the Codnoy Dam. It's a series of 7 container gates aligned across the Oneida River, each 50 feet wide. It was constructed in 1951 to replace a fixed crest dam that was found to be hydraulically limiting and causing flooding on the upstream Oneida Lake. And so this was the current operation now 71 years later. And Canal Corporation uses these gates to regulate water levels on Oneida Lake between April 1st or after the spring freshet through December 1st. And on December 1st, the gates are fully opened. In the bottom right photo shows the gates in the wintertime opened, and the upper position shows the gates in the closed position. They've been closed up until today, been closed for several weeks already. So only regulated as needed. And during flood periods, increased flow periods, the gates are opened incrementally as necessary to maintain desired water levels on Oneida Lake. Here's kind of a layout of the Oneida Lake and the Codnoy Dam. The light blue line through the center of the picture is the canal navigation channel, which runs through the middle of Oneida Lake and then through the Oneida River. Through that section of referred to as Anthony's Cut in the middle is Lock 23, which raises and lowers boats 6.8 feet. But there's this long loop around the Codnoy Dam area of the Oneida River where the dam exists at the upper end of the horseshoe. And that's where the dam is actually located in this horseshoe. So it's in the riverine portion of the canal and not the navigable part, not the navigable portion. And as I said, upstream of the dam are the remnants of the former dam that was originally built. And there's been some questions of whether those remnants have an impact on the flows, and something that we will be studying in the hydrology and engineering subcommittee. Here's a an illustration of the rule curve for Oneida Lake, really minimum and maximum target levels between April 1st and the end of November. And the red line is the Oneida Lake water levels measured at the Cleveland gauge, which is midway on the north side of the lake. And just shows you that even though there was some rain events this year, water levels were very much regulated into target levels, and also showed that we didn't have any big spring snow melt in spring flood conditions. And so during my 22-year tenure, this has been the driest year. First year in my tenure that we never had to close a dam or canal for a high water event. So that was a marked positive. But we're at the mercy of Mother Nature, and we do take the good with the bad. Going to move over to Lock 24 in Baldwinsville, right in the downtown. The Seneca River traverses Baldwinsville, and this dam, it's kind of tough to see here, but in the center of the picture is a dam which was built to create a navigation pool from the lower level of the Seneca River to the upstream level and canalize the river. The dam really serves as a flow control device, and when water levels can't be maintained using that long spillway, there's container gate and hydropower companies that are used to regulate water levels. The navigation lock is used for one purpose, and that's for navigating boats, essentially a water elevator. It has no flow control opportunities. And Paper Mill Island is owned, operated, run by the former Baldwinsville InBev Corporation, and there's a hot point, stop point, a lot of concerts that are run through the amphitheater all summer long. And a lot of people come here to utilize this area by boat and by car and walking. So it's definitely a hot spot in the area. A lot going on here. Taking a little different perspective of the layout here from the aerial photo. The Canal Corporation has a container gate built into the dam, and that's used to maintain water levels on the upstream side of the dam in concert with Brookfield and Northline power generation facilities on the north and south side. And so they're required to maintain the water level at the crest of the dam. But during high flows, obviously, the water level does rise and spill over while they're generating. So there are essentially 5 separate water regulating devices here. Canal Corporation Tanner gates, 2 in Brookfield and 2 by Northline that are used to regulate water levels. And that 10-foot rise in water level from the lower end of the lock to the upper level is really why this whole structure was built. And it was pretty evident today during the bus tour. We talked a lot about the hydraulic restriction of the waterways. And the Seneca River certainly has some hydraulic restrictions to it. And this dam is part of that restriction. Moving on upstream to Cross Lake, kind of give a lay of the land of how flows here all flow from west to east, from left to right generally, and water flows into Cross Lake, which is just a widening of the Seneca River. It's not a regulated, no dam is creating this other than the dam down in Waldinsville. And Cross Lake was originally 11 feet higher than it is right now. During the 1850s, there was an effort with the intent to lower the Montezuma Marsh. 7 feet reduction took place in the late 1850s. And then with the construction of the barge canal in the early 1900s, the lake was lowered 4 more feet for 11 feet total to create the elevations suitable for canalizing the Seneca River. State ditch, which is the outlet of the canal, outlet of the lake, was built to really shorten the navigation distance around Jack's Reef. As well, it did provide a hydraulic restriction to essentially minimize downstream flooding and really target the area for high water events to be managed upstream of that hydraulic restriction state ditch. We stopped at the Cross Lake Inn and Marina, really to give a look at some of the lay of the land around Cross Lake. A lot of properties there that are very close to the water, and certainly the shorelines are quite flood prone, but many of the residents and businesses on the lake are built well elevated so they don't deal directly with flooding in the properties themselves, but some are flood prone. But all of these facilities operate with wells and septic systems that are generally in the floodplain. So when we do have high water levels, elevated water levels, the efficacy of those facilities are always compromised due to prolonged high water level events. So I think it was good for us to get a lay of the land at the Codner Dam, Baldwinsville, and Cross Lake here to see how these all fit together. We then moved up to our final stop on Cuba Lake at Lock CS1. And here there is a 9-foot drop normally during the navigation season, where again we have a navigation lock on the right side of the channel, and then on the left side, or west side, the Tanner Gate Dam is used, and 6 gates are regulated as needed to maintain desired water levels on Cuba Lake, while attempting to make operations to minimize flooding on the downstream side of the Seneca River, which carries all the way down through Baldwinsville and this pool with no dam. So it's an integral part of our overall water management paradigm is regulation of this. And it's a 62 square mile lake, and Seneca Lake flows directly into that, and Cuba Lake flows into Seneca Lake. So there's a great deal of management here that goes into managing the waterways of the canals in Cuba Lake. Here's a photo of water levels this year. A lot going on here. I'll try to update this, kind of go through this quickly. This graphic is updated on the Canal Corporation website twice a week on Mondays and Thursdays, or more frequently when we have drastically changing water levels. We're regulating again to target minimum levels and maximum levels, with a provision on this rule curve that during high snowpack levels in the spring to move forward to an increased drawdown by a foot or so to really provide an additional level of storage in the lake, using it as a reservoir to minimize the downstream level. And it kind of just shows here how the minor and major flood depth levels, along with the 100-year flood elevation, do exist and how they compare to our normal operations. And generally, we're trying to maintain the summer level of 383.5 feet And we did a pretty good job this year, largely based on the fact that we had water levels that were, the rainfall that was manageable this year and nothing that was out of the ordinary. I do draw attention to the relationship between the red line, which is the amount of accumulated water level, and the blue line, which is the downstream level, downstream of Lock CS1. And there's an interesting synergy that exists. When flows are low and release, there's about that 9.5 foot difference in water levels. However, when we're making heavy releases to trying to minimize water level rises on Cuba Lake, we have to release water, which increases the water level on the downstream side. And in doing so, there's a bit of hedging that's going on, trying to minimize flood concerns going forward on the lake, along with the flood concerns on the downstream side. So a lot of active management is going on. When we compare this to 2021, an unusually wet year, not only I think the spring was pretty good, but we had some episodic events in May and in August and September, some heavy rainfall, looking at 3.5 inches of rainfall in October, and we had marked quick jumps, bringing the lake up to a 9 foot damage level. We had to release water, which created a level rise in the downstream level too. So that's that synergy that exists. But when we go into late October and early November, had some really heavy rain that was persistent. These rainfall totals in the top are only recorded at the lock. It's not a watershed perspective, and there were certainly heavier rains falling in the watershed, but much different than what we were reporting here. But in order to minimize the flooding on the lake, we had to raise the water levels downstream, and ultimately lasted for about a month of high water levels, out of bank levels on the downstream side. And then for the rest of the year, elevated water levels, but within bank. So those levels of the lake and downstream level are definitely an interesting synergy.
Howard, on that last slide, those peaks on the blue, they identify heavy precipitation periods. I think it's the other slide.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Those are all peaks. Those are all heavy precipitation periods.
Yeah, they are, Brian. What's happening here is we're attempting to keep the lake from getting out of control. We got out of control a little bit in mid to late August, in early September, and we're making decisions based on rainfall forecasting, rainfall occurring, and trying to minimize that. And generally, we're bank full at an elevation of 380 feet, and so we're trying to maintain that water level to the extent we can. So keep the downstream below bank full and the lake below in a target level, so we don't jump into the minor flood stage. But at times, we're not able to, largely because of the large rainfall and runoff. I do denote that during the summer, we had that nearly 3.5 inches of rain in August that resulted in a modest rise, but in the October-November period, there was less rainfall, but it happened in time after the leaves changed. The hydrologic season went from the growing season into the groundwater recharge season, and so much less rainfall resulted in much more runoff. And so you're a little bit at the mercy of Mother Nature in a different way as we move through different hydrologic seasons.
Thank you.
And lastly, just I think it's good to look at flooded records in 1993. When I was doing my graduate work at SUNY ESF, was talking with the major professors, saying, geez, one of those guys in the canals just opened the gates. Well, they were all open. And in fact, they were open so much, the river reversed flow. And the water actually flowed into Cuba Lake from the downstream level. And those of us who were on the bus tour today could see what that really meant, and showed the widespread flooding that occurred, not only at the lock, but all the way downstream through Cross Lake Baldwinsville. And Oneida Lake had its ongoing series of flooding that occurred simultaneously. So we're definitely at the mercy of Mother Nature. But then once we got the system back into control, they did a pretty good job of maintaining water levels and getting the lakes drawn down. I'll just note that once we get to a drawdown period in November and December, you see how we did maintain water levels, at near or below the target levels, but you can't lower the lake without raising the water levels downstream. It's just a part of that synergy of flows that come into play there. So water levels will rise as we're raising water levels. Not only is Cuba Lake and the Canal Corporation lowering Cuba Lake, but all the other finger lakes are at the same time lowering their levels for winter levels as well. So there's an influx of inflow into the center of the river, all of which just go well through Cross Lake and Baldwinsville.
Howard, before we go back onto that slide, before we go on to the subcommittees, I want to give our task force members any chance to comment or ask questions on the 4 sites that we looked at today. But what is the interplay between the 4 sites, and what are the touch points in each of these important sites that we visited that may be the basis of looking at opportunities to control flood management? You wanna talk about that?
Sure. Well, I think we can, be a good time to talk about that. I chose these sites largely because I've been studying this for a long time, and others have studied it as well before me. And it's more or less looking at where the control points. These are the primary control points where water is regulated, except for Cross Lake, which is the area that's flood prone. So what measures, I think the task force members there to look at what measures could be evaluated, say, here's what the infrastructure exists now. And that if changes were going to be made, there's a need to really understand what are the controlling factors now that come into play. So not only are they fixed structures that retard the flow of water, but there's actually a hydraulic limitation of the river and features themselves. And all that has to be put into appropriate context. So when you move into Baldwinsville, there's been a discussion and an agreement to evaluate possibly putting in a more gates or a bladder dam on the Baldwinsville.
And if you want to go back to any of the previous slides, please do.
Yeah, so I'll just go
I think it's
quickly.
worthwhile, so people who are following the meeting online,
Yeah.
know what we're talking about.
Codnoy Dam, the remnants I mentioned upstream of the dam, there's been discussions about removing those remnants, that they would possibly minimize the hydraulic obstruction of the river, and it would possibly allow for better management of Oneida Lake and minimize flooding, not only on the Oneida Lake itself, but in the Oneida River from the Codnoy Dam upstream. Been studied extensively to show that that's not the case, but it's certainly an item that may be worth further consideration looking at what that obstruction is. When we go to Baldwinsville, here we're looking at putting a bladder dam across that long Baldwinsville Dam and allowing for flows to be released.
You want to explain what a bladder dam is for people that may not know?
Sure, a bladder dam is similar to a tainer gate, but instead of raising it out of the water through either hydraulic or pneumatic control, the bladder would be lowered so that water would flow over that and allow it to flow downstream in a more or less unobstructed fashion. We just, during the bus tour, we did discuss water level rises sharply on the downstream side of this dam as well. So there are restrictions downstream. So it's not as simple as just opening the floodgates per se and not causing any issues, but we need to minimize not only flood damages upstream, but make sure we're not incurring any flood damages downstream as well. So I think that'll be part of the first.
So the bladder dam would impact water flowing down the Seneca River to what body? Where would the flood impact, the flood mitigation impact be? Making
Upstream.
adjustments here.
From this all the way upstream to Box CS1.
Right.
Essentially, we change the hydraulic gradient. So it's a fixed crust dam. So the water either flows over the dam during a flood flow. The powerhouses are in full operation. The tainer gate's fully open. Last year, I went and looked. The tainer gate of Baldwinsville Dam, the Canal Corporation, was opened on the 17th of October. It wasn't closed until sometime in February. So again, the river was controlling itself. Having a bladder dam would allow that water level to be drawn down through more active management than exists right now. And the caution would be that we can't put more water downstream that exists right now and essentially raise that floodplain downstream above what it exists right now. And that's the challenge here, how to figure out what to do with Baldwinsville.
Yes, sir. No.
So the concept of the bladder dam is the concept that the current fixed part of the dam would actually be cut down to
Correct.
make room for it.
We would remove the concrete dam there, and I can circulate to the group. I got some great slides. I'm working on another project where we're looking at putting one in really soon. The Fisher's Ferry Dam at Block 7 of the canal, and would essentially be in the upright position normally. So when we have flood flows, that crest would lower down and allow the water to spill over at a lower controlling water surface. And I'm thinking the dam will be somewhere between 6 to 8 feet high. So you can see how you would definitely have the ability to let more water downstream. The challenge being though is that downstream water level is going to rise. And we're going to make sure we're not creating a situation where we're creating a flood condition downstream that's benefited by the existing hydraulic obstruction that exists in the dam and the interiors and hydropower.
Want to Cross Lake.
Yeah, I mean, Cross Lake here is a challenge. A lot of homes and properties that are in the floodplain, and definitely when that water level rise definitely shows some issues. That throttling device of the Cold Street Dam certainly is something that was built intentionally. That's something that was created after the fact, and is a hydraulic obstruction that exists. And so, if it were to be potentially expanded to let more water downstream and increase the hydraulics through there, likewise, you can't do it in a way that's going to flood the areas immediately and all the way downstream until it becomes a non-issue. And so,
You mean the state ditch,
the
right?
state ditch,
Right.
I'm sorry, yes,
So the state ditch is a straight line rock cut.
almost straight.
Almost a straight line. We saw that today from the bus. It's relatively narrow. It was built at the time for the hydrology at the time. One of the considerations might be to look whether modifications might need to be made to the
Sure.
state ditch cut, right?
Yeah, good point, Brian. I mean, let's face it. What's changed since then? We've had certainly increased development throughout the watershed in the last 100+ years, no doubt. We can look at areas even around Cross Lake, in the Idaho Basin, immensely in the Finger Lakes, huge development that's occurred. That development has resulted in increased runoff than would have occurred in the undeveloped scenario. So we have more water from the same rainfall runoff producing event. Couple that with climate change, and now we're having these more extreme dry periods and more extreme episodic wet weather periods that are raining heavy rain down in short period of time is making these fixed controls of this canal. Need to make really clear, the canal was built for navigation purposes and was designed really for one thing in mind, essentially not to increase the water levels that would have occurred before the canal was built. It was found that the dam at Illinois, the original dam, resulted in damages to Oneida Lake residents and was replaced after the state, after year was paying damages to the property owners on Oneida Lake. And state said, let's fix this and put in a dam we can fully remove to remove the hydraulic obstruction during flood flows and throughout the winter. But it's not a flood mitigation construct and wasn't built for like flood mitigation, but to really provide stable water levels during navigation periods. And I'd say for the majority of the time, and I'm talking in the high 90% period of time, water levels are maintained rather well throughout the Oswego River Basin. However, during those episodic periods of either high snowpack runoff in the spring or episodic events that occur from time to time, the water levels do rise and do go out of its banks. And we're looking at ways to see if we can minimize the frequency, duration, and magnitude of those flood conditions.
So the Cross Lake actually drains through the state ditch, is that?
That's right.
Is that, so we're looking at water flow that would go from the top of the slope to the bottom, is that correct?
Correct.
That's north on top, so it would have a southerly flow.
Correct.
And the thinking is that if you had a larger capacity ditch cut, you could exit more water, more effectively, rapidly adjust water levels without impacting people that are downstream.
Well, no, I didn't say that. There's no doubt that a wider channel would have better hydraulics. What if you would remove the hydraulic obstruction downstream? So it's only going to be able to pass as much water as the downstream channel allows it to without
Whatever
rising.
obstruction is down.
However, what we can't do is move the flood from upstream to downstream in any of these locations, whether it's Oneida Lake or Cross Lake or Cuba Lake. The solution can't be, oh, let's open up the floodgates and flood the people downstream. Right. So everything exists in its own dynamic equilibrium, and we're going to study in the hydrology and engineering subcommittee what some of our limitations are and what the recommendations for future stuff in our report.
That helps a lot. And then on to CS1.
Yeah, same thing here. We're just looking at really how Cuba Lake water levels are managed. You know, we're maintaining at 3.35 right now in the summer. We have certain drawdown periods in the winter. Are that appropriate, or are there potential modifications to these rule curves and lake levels that could be done to potentially minimize the flooding conditions downstream? The channel downstream has a finite capacity. And obviously, if you open up some of these hydraulic obstructions we talked about downstream, it would benefit this. But a further study would be really to look and explore what the real benefits would be. And then two, what the consequences of having lower lake levels, because there are consequences as well, and using the lakes more as a reservoir for storage rather than operating as a high. Not just Cuba Lake, but all the finger lakes. Canal Corporation regulates Cuba Lake, and the rest are all run by municipal entities with the exception of Seneca Lake, which is operated by a hydropower company.
So that is the overview of what the dynamics, the water control dynamics are of those four locations. And now it may be appropriate to call on members of the task force if they want to add to this conversation on any one or all of the four, and ask questions of Howard's guest Ted.
Howard, I'm curious, does your agency or any other agency have records of flow through any of your gates, whether they're instantaneous or daily average? So when I look at the rule curves, I can see water levels in the lakes or in the river. I'm curious if I could overlay discharge.
Yeah, what I was going to do was put a secondary axis, get rid of the precipitation of secondary axis on this slide and put flow, and that would be very telling. So yeah, there's a USGS gauge downstream, right about we turn down to Route 20. There's a bridge there. There's a USGS gauge on that bridge. But prior to that gauge going in, probably time flies, 5-6 years ago, we calculated discharge using a theoretical discharge based on upstream, downstream elevations and the opening of the container gates, which certainly is the first order proclamation, which is certainly useful for what you're asking. So we're not doing this blindly. The gate changes we're making are really flow based. And we know from a flow based standpoint, from doing this long enough, understanding what the corresponding downstream water levels are. So we're not just flippantly opening gates. We're doing that, changing gate openings to achieve desired release rates to result in corresponding water levels downstream. Okay. The gauge is nice because it updates every 15 minutes. So I think it's very choppy.
I wouldn't need the instantaneous because these look like they're probably
These are
daily average, right?
This is 8 a.m. reading every day.
Yeah. So if that were something that.
Oh, sure. I have all that data. I'm
really
probably
looking at it.
at my fingertips. I have it from 1982 to present.
And I'm not asking this to put a burden on you, but there are graphs also for the other control points that you were looking at. So the four that we went through, you probably don't have anything for the state ditch, but at Baldwinsville.
There's a USGS gauge and state ditch that existed prior to my tenure here. So yes, we have water levels at Baldwinsville, state ditch, Cross Lake, Port Byron.
But also discharges at some of those locations.
Port Byron has discharge. And what it does is we have that was built and put in just downstream of the next major upstream inflow from the Wasco Lake to the Wasco Lake outlet from Auburn. And so generally we see, we get a lot of data.
Okay.
We're unfortunately deluged with data, which is good.
Right. Great fun. I was thinking that the discharges would just help me understand volumetric transfers.
Well, no, absolutely. Okay. And you'll see what some of the flows are. We talked about the hydraulic restrictions of various flows and the corresponding water. That was really created by seeing the water levels and the flows simultaneously to get a good understanding of what is happening. Because they both exist in unique synergy, but looking at flows are just as important as elevations.
I'll hold my other questions for later.
It's good. Thank you very much, Ted. Those are good. Other comments or questions by task force members? Bill,
So given that this task force is tasked with making recommendations that are not necessarily limited to things that the Canal Corp itself has control over, a part of this puzzle are that there are control points that other organizations or other agencies have. And I'm not suggesting that you go through the list of them now, but I think it'd be useful for us to have that list of the nature of the control points and who manages them.
I will be hosting a subcommittee meeting of the engineering and metrology subcommittee, and we will make sure when we're through that everyone knows them very well and knows what the challenges are. And those lakes all have rule curves, and they have their own constituencies, and they have their own individual managers who are regulating for their own constituencies. But most of them are, like Ted mentioned, are gauged as well. So they have lake levels and they have release rates as well. So no one exists in grand isolation here. There's a lot of known, it's easy to do an after action forensics to see what's going on.
So we're going to get into that. We're going to get into your subcommittee and the other two that we're going to form, but you bring up a very good point, and it's something that I said going in our opening comments, in that no one agency is going to be responsible for forming solutions. There are individual water authorities, there are individual stakeholders, and it's going to be a collective solution. Also, I think, Howard, part of your group will also be looking on the reaction that happens. Making one solution or one change of one water control device may alleviate something there, but it would impact someone else. So for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, and the reaction is often in the form of sending water from one place to the other. So we have to look at that carefully. We have to be able to determine what works best for the group as a whole. Those are complex situations that we're going to get into. Other members of the task force, Robbie, anything that you'd like to chime in on screen, please feel free to chime in. We can't see you, but please speak up. Okay. Well, I think that's a good opportunity now. And again, we don't have to stop talking now. We can go on, and something occurs to you, please put up your hand if Sydney would like to talk. But Howard, that was a very good overview, and it's great. There's no substitute for being able to get into the field and see what's going on, and also to be able to hear back from the public and the stakeholders on what they feel. We're glad we have members of the lake associations and neighbors here with us today. To the greatest extent possible, we're going to outline the meetings that we've had. We've had 2 meetings so far. We have at least 2 planned for the 2022 calendar year. Those are formal task force meetings. But to the greatest extent possible, we're going to rely upon the chairs and the members of 3 subcommittees that are going to be formed. As Howard has just said, Howard is going to lead the hydrology and engineering subcommittee moving forward. And that is going to be studying the Mohawk River Basin and the Oswego River Basin, including analysis of measures to be considered within the 4 sites that we visited today. And I'm sure Howard's activities will not be limited to just that. Another subcommittee is grants and policies, and that's going to be chaired by Tom Snow, who is the New York State DEC watershed coordinator. And in addition to considering policy recommendations as part of the task force, this team will also identify various state and federal funding opportunities which may relate to hazard mitigation. And of course, we know that there's a lot of federal funding within the stream, as well as a very large environmental bond act, which is on the ballot for November. But let's not put the cart before the horse. Let's see what funding opportunities are out there. So Tom Snow and his team will be looking at grants and policies and opportunities to secure funding to address the recommendations that we put forward to the governor in our final report due by July 1st of 2023. And finally, our public engagement and outreach committee is going to be chaired by Rebecca Hughes, who is the senior director of our public outreach for NIPA and Canal Corporation. Rebecca is on the screen today or listening in, is unable to be with us personally, but her subcommittee has already developed a webpage for upstate flood mitigation task force materials, and that includes the recordings of our task force meetings and any materials reference. So the meeting that we held on on August 22nd, and the meeting that we are holding today, those are going to be part of the website. They will also lead efforts to engage with residents and others impacted in the identified watersheds. And they will also work cross-functionally with other subcommittees to identify the potential for any adverse public impacts related to recommended measures. There's an example of how each subcommittee might analyze a mitigation measure. And Rebecca has provided this. I'm going to let her chime in also. In 1999, the Army Corps of Engineers issued a study called Cross Lakes Seneca River Flood Damage Reduction Measures that suggests the Army Corps and DEC conduct an environmental review of possible flood mitigation measures, including the following: to remove a portion of the existing masonry dam on the Seneca River at Baldwinsville and replace it with an inflatable rubber dam, bladder dam. Howard's really already gone into this. Install slide gates at the Phoenix Dam on the Oswego River. We saw Oswego Canal Lock 1 at Phoenix, and to remove the remnants of the old Cottonwood Dam upstream of the present Tainer Gate at Cottonwood. There was a dam previously that was constructed in 1921 when the Barge Canal first opened. It didn't work that well. Howard's already gone over that, and that led to the creation of the Tainer Gate Dam, which we saw today, which I believe was constructed in 1950, 1951. In this example, Howard's team would consider what agencies and information, permits, resources were needed to complete the recommended environmental review, including the Army Corps, DEC, FERC, that is the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife. Tom Snow's team might consider what state or federal funds might be available to support or study subsequent implementation if feasible. So Howard identifies what needs to be done, and Tom Snow's committee comes up with how are we going to pay for it? Where are the funds? What can we use? Lastly, Rebecca's committee will assess what is the public impact. What are the implications of any such measures on communities both upstream and downstream? That sort of gets back to what I was saying. You make a fix or an adjustment in one location. What does it do to the other? So these are very important to dynamics going on here, and it's good that we have these folks leading these committees. Rebecca, would you like to say anything? Are you able to access the meeting?
Yeah, thank you, Brian. I appreciate that. I don't have much to add. I just thought it was important to have a tangible example of how the subcommittees will work. First and foremost, there's a lot of data already gathered about both of these large watersheds. I think it's safe to say that the analysis and recommendations that are documented in the Mohawk River Basin through the Mohawk River Action Agenda and other documents are a little bit more mature probably than the analysis that's been done on the Oswego River Basin. So we've got this large body of work that's made suggestions and where considerations have been made. But I think in that example where we look back at that 1999 set of recommendations from the Army Corps of Engineers, we can really advance that as a task force to say, okay, what's next? How do we look at the environmental impacts, the permitting, what was considered in that recommendation versus what might have been left out. And that's just one example among many. But I think, in this region, it's a really long-awaited initiative to really bring all of these bodies of work together to draw conclusions, to make recommendations, and ultimately to make recommendations for solutions that are going to help people. And that's the driver for all of this work. So thank you for letting me chime in. I'm happy to answer any further questions when we get to that part of the agenda.
Well, we look forward to your scheduling your subcommittee work, Rebecca, and the work that you will be doing and the people that you'll be calling upon to help you out with that. Part of your portfolio is to set up a website for public information sharing. Is that up and live now?
It is. We'll share the link when we share the recording of the meeting.
Very good. Thank you. So any questions on the subcommittees? Let's go back to the subcommittee slide. Questions on the subcommittees. My understanding is that the chairperson, whether it's Howard, Tom, or Rebecca, will reach out to those members of the task force and other experts that may be available to help out and to move the work forward. And of course, when we reconvene for our next formal task force meeting, we are going to hear from each of the three subcommittees the work that they have done and the policies and the recommendations that they are putting forward for us to consider. So let's take a look, then go forward and look at the task force schedule. Next slide, please, Rob. Okay, we met on August 22nd. And we met again today, October 27th. We have tentatively identified 2 meetings for April of 2023 and of June 2023 before we wrap things up. And again, a lot of the work is going to be done at the subcommittee level, and we will take that input and that intake and process that. Of course, all of these meetings are to be held in accordance with the open meetings law, and additional meetings may be scheduled at the discretion of the chair. It is important to note that our April 2023 meeting will include a presentation of our interim findings and a public town hall session to gather feedback to inform the final report. So we're going to be working on that, and don't exclude the opportunity that there may be other meetings coming up before we get to April. Maybe in the interest of global warming, things will be warm for February, and we'll have the opportunity to get back out. So that is our tentative plan for right now. We don't have dates within those months, but that is the target date. And we'll keep everyone informed of the work of the subcommittees, of course, going forward. And now it is time for public discussion. But before I take public discussion, I want to know if there's any other issues that members of the task force would like to address or discuss, or questions to be asked. Okay. No other questions from the task force. We would also like to, anyone on screen have questions or comments? Robbie? Now I would like to ask any members of the public who are with us today or are on screen who've got questions, comments that they would like the task force to hear. Yes, sir. Please stand and identify yourself once more, please.
Yes, thank you. John Harmon from the United Lake Association. First of all, I'd like to thank Director Stratton and the panel for the great work that you're doing and are about to do. It's significant work, and we appreciate that. We'd also like to thank Howard for his work over the many years. The OLA considers Howard a great champion for keeping the water levels at a proper level on Ida Lake. We do understand that this is a very complex system. You talked about 4 different bodies of water. There are a couple features of Oneida Lake that are unique that I'd like to bring up. First of all, we are the largest body of water in that system with the greatest population, thousands and thousands of residents and businesses in this area. And also Oneida Lake has a great, enormous economic engine. Millions and millions of dollars are generated each year by residents, businesses, and of course, tourists who come in to visit our lake. So I know you'll keep that in mind as you continue your work. One feature that makes Oneida Lake unique as well is that it's an extremely shallow lake compared to the other bodies of water you've discussed. And as a result, the slightest change in water levels have an enormous and significant change in shoreline activities. You know, whether you're draining down the lake, for example, I live on the lake myself, and I have 100 feet of dock, and at the end of my dock, it's 2.5 feet deep. The slightest change of water level, sends the shoreline way out if you're draining the lake, or way up if water comes into the lake. And the last thing I wanted to mention is, this entire discussion is talked about water, but on Oneida Lake, there's another W that's extremely important and just as significant, and that's wind. We're a very shallow lake with an east-west chord, 20 plus miles there. So when that wind blows, out of the east or west, which is usually the prevailing wind, the 20-mile fetch results in enormous wave action, coupled with the shallow, the shallow shoreline. For example, last August when we had that, and I know it was no one's fault, when we had that difficult flooding event and my dock and other docks were underwater, the sun was out and we didn't pray for more sun. What we prayed for was no wind, because still water over the docks, we can deal with that. But once that wind blows up and the waves start to churn, that creates an enormous force. So please keep in mind also as you're doing your deliberations that water is important, but wind is extremely important to us on Oneida Lake as well. So thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak, and good luck going forward.
Thank you, John. I want to let you know that Howard was very prompt to point out the wind effect of the other W.
Okay.
Today, when we were not only talking about Oneida Lake, but other water bodies too. But we know from Sylvan Beach and those areas out there that it is definitely a factor. There's other infrastructure issues that we look at that are outside of the scope of the task force, which may also help the task force. So I'm sure Howard's going to take that under his subcommittee and be working on that. Thank you. Thank you. Maureen, do you have anything you'd like to say? Please introduce yourself again for all of us and for the people tuning in at home.
Maureen Doyle. I'm a resident and a property owner in the Cross Lake area. We own one parcel of ours is on the Seneca River section of the canal, just west of Cross Lake. We have about 1,000 foot of frontage on the canal. We do flood a lot. What I say to people is the Seneca River Cross Lake area of the New York State Canal System floods more often at higher elevations and for longer durations along the whole canal system. And that's after 40 years of watching this monitoring. I monitor water levels, the weather, and all that stuff. So one topic that is really crucial to the Cross Lake area, and maybe other areas, but I think Cross Lake has a real serious problem with filling. Okay.
I'm sorry, say that again.
With filling. People filling waterfront property.
Right.
DEC does a great job. They can't be there 24/7. I don't know, what the codes are. I often wonder if local, county, excuse me, state and federal codes should be revisited when it comes to filling and construction on waterfront properties. And as everyone here knows, when a property owner fills their land, the neighbor floods worse.
Right.
And it's been a major, major problem there in all the years I've been there, about 43 years. So, Mr. Goble, in your tour, you touched on a lot of the things I was going to touch on, so I'm going to sneak at my notes. Okay, the Seneca River watershed, which includes Cross Lake, drains a total of 3,468 square miles, or about 2/3 of the Oswego River drainage basin, which is about 5,120 square miles. That might be one reason it floods a lot. The level of fraud, Mr. Goble touched that one. So my husband and I were claimants of the lawsuit as a result of what went on during the 92-93 floods. Most of the claimants were from the Oneida Lake area, but most of the people on Cross Lake entered participated as well. We were all dismissed. The Cross Lake claimants were all dismissed by the judge. I believe it was because the flooding on Cross Lake is considered nuisance flooding by the Army Corps of Engineers. You know, people lose docks, they lose all their furniture and everything they, for whatever reason, leave on their waterfront. Boats may float away, driveways are flooded. Typically the most serious damage to homes and camps on Cross Lake are, they need to change their carpeting in their homes and their camps. As far as I know, researching records and everything, I don't know if I've ever heard of anyone dying because of flooding on Cross Lake. I've never heard of a person getting injured or a pet getting injured during flooding on Cross Lake. When I first learned this term nuisance flooding, I was outraged. But as you learn more and you do more research, you realize that it really is nuisance flooding. And I think education of property owners is huge, huge. Some years ago, there was a plan to create a weather forecasting program. And I think Mr. Goldman could probably fill you in on the details of that. I don't think it never came to fruition. When there's flooding in central New York, typically Cross Lake is the first one to flood and the last one to flood. But when you listen to the local news media, you won't hear that Cross Lake is flooded. You won't hear that when they give warnings, okay, beware, there may be a flood. Cross Lake and Seneca River are never included in those news media outlets. So I think something like that weather forecasting program might be revisited to help not only Cross Lake, but this would help everybody, you know, across the way, across the state. Okay, let's see. Mr. Gold will slow me down, but that's okay.
You can always submit those two more.
Okay, okay.
Or we can take those written if you want it.
Okay.
Email them to us too.
Thank you. We're all familiar with the Army Corps of Engineers cost to benefit ratio. Cross Lake, Seneca River area never fares well with that. You know, the low density population, lower property values, lower tax revenue compared to downstream. So I'm very concerned about, as a flood victim, I'm very concerned about relocating the flooding with a bladder dam or an additional flood in Baldwinsville. You've got high-end houses, just higher density population, much higher property values, and definitely a huge, huge increase in tax revenue. So that's, I'm not for either one of them for that purpose. Shirley, I'm sorry about this. You know about all the studies. Everybody's got the studies. It's been studied to death. No viable solution has been found. The bladder dam, you know, I can tell you, everybody on Cross Lake at the time when the bladder dam idea came out, we were thrilled. We thought this was the greatest thing, and this was going to resolve all of our problems. And I don't think at this point it would resolve all of our problems, but people downstream would greatly suffer by it. The flood warning system, realtors, you know, when as we all know, when you go to sell your property, you have to fill out a property disclosure. I can't tell you over the years how many times I'll get phone calls from new waterfront property owners and they say, well, what's up with this flooding? People are telling me to call you, you'll tell me about the flooding. Mm-hmm. Well, they aren't doing that. And I don't know what can be done about that. And all these things are things I think the task force can do, but I just want to share these ideas with you. These property disclosures, and a flood-prone area should definitely be listed on a property disclosure. I'm not an attorney, but I would think it would be something that would be required. Okay. Go ahead.
Maureen, we have a lot of people on screen that may want to ask something also. If I could ask you to summarize that.
I sure will. I sure will.
We could move on to anyone else.
what's happening with the Reimagine the Canals Task Force plan to recreate a wetland west of Cross Lake on the Seneca River?
I don't have that information. I know Howard was working on that previously, but I don't know where the Reimagine the Canals issue is going. But if we can get you, if we can follow up with you on that, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, wetlands.
Are you referring to the Montezuma project?
No, it was,
Yeah, it is, Maureen.
it is, well, what was, no, there was a smaller one.
It's part of the
Is
state-
that part of the
It's
Montezuma
part of
project? Okay,
DEC's Montezuma project, not the federal one.
okay.
Permitting is being finalized right now and we're hopeful to be underway with bids and construction, if not this winter, next spring.
Great news. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Matt. Marco, Pete, did you have your hand up? No, okay, very good. Thank you, Maureen. The gentleman in the corner, also from Robbie Engineering, any comments, questions? No? Not this time. Okay. Anyone at the table before I go on screen? And we have a lot of guests that have joined in on screen. Anyone who have any questions or comments in the time that we have remaining?
Oh, this is Nagappa Ravindra. I just want to add that, Dan Clark will serve on the engineering and hydrology subcommittee from our office. If or volunteer him.
Yeah, that'd be great. We'll certainly be reaching out to you, Robbie, to ensure that we get someone from Robbie at your choice on the task force, on the subcommittee. Thank you.
And you can you can volunteer for all 3 subcommittees if you'd like to. There's no limit. We'll put you where you would like to be and where we can use your expertise. Thank you. Marie Kremer, do you have anything you wanted to add? No, very good. I don't hear any other comments and questions.
Scott.
Oh, Scott has one. I'm sorry, Scott, go ahead.
No worries. I'm getting computer glitches here. Just very briefly, thank you. As always, I learn something new every time. On behalf of the members of Boat Owners Association United States, about 44,000 in New York, as well as everybody who transits the waterway to go points far, thank you for keeping the waterway safe for navigation in this area and in other areas. And as you deliberate through this process, I know you are facing challenges across many different fronts, but keeping the waterway as a safe place to boat is very important. So thank you.
Thank you, Scott. It was good to see you at our conference in October and all of your team's work. And we know that many of your members traverse the canal system along the loop and of course within the state, and it's very, very valuable waterway. And we're winding down our season, and Sunday, October 30th will probably be the last day for the tour boats that have been granted extended navigation permits. So things will be getting very quiet, and then we go into our winter work, but that doesn't impede the work at all of our subcommittees and our task force. So thank you for that. Anyone else on screen? Anyone at the table? Well, this concludes, if there are any more comments, this concludes our October 27th meeting of the Upstate Flood Mitigation Task Force. Again, I want to thank all of our task force members and the members of the public, and also thank Howard for the great tour today, for organizing the tour. There's no substitute for being able to get into the field to be able to see these. There may be other tours that are scheduled by the individual subcommittees as we go to look to other look back, or maybe go back for a second look at some of the other structures that we looked at today and see if there's other opportunities. So we'll be getting more about that, and Rebecca is going to make sure we get information out to everybody about the website and the locations of everything. So all of the information is key. I don't know that we're governed by parliamentary procedure, but I'll take liberty of the chair and say, is there a motion to adjourn? Moved by Ted Andretti, seconded by Orrin Mac. Murray. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Opposed say no. We are adjourned. Thank you very much, and thank you, everybody, for tuning in.